That's the thing about stories. They never really end, do they? We're still telling the same stories we've always told, just with different names, different faces.
The Body Snatchers is a 1955 horror science fiction novel by Jack Finney. It was first published in a serialized format in Collier's magazine in 1954 and was turned into the full novel version in 1955. Collier's magazine isn't around today, so I had to look it up, and apparently it was a general interest magazine. Do we have those today? What's the equivalent of a Collier's magazine nowadays? Like, what's a general interest magazine in 2024? I don't know. Either way, I think it's interesting that the story like The Body Snatchers, this science fiction horror story about evil aliens making replicas out of people, was published nationally in a general interest magazine that just anyone would read. This Body Snatcher story was directly adapted into 4 feature films. You got one in the 50s, one in the 70s, one in the early 90s, and one in the 2000s. I say directly adapted into films because this book is hugely influential. A lot of things take ideas from it, or a lot of things reference it. This was the inspiration for the movie The Faculty, which I think came out in the late 90s, which is a pretty good movie if you haven't seen it. I think Robert Rodriguez made it. There was another movie I haven't seen called Assimilate, which is apparently very, very similar to this. However, I'm not counting those because if you've, for example, seen The Faculty, it's not the same story as this. Very similar. Same idea of like alien replicas and all that, but it's not the same story. Apparently, Looney Tunes did a adaptation of this called Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is kind of funny. If you haven't seen my Adaptation Showdowns before, welcome. I hope you enjoy this. Here's how it works. I like to read the original story, the original novel, and then I go find direct film adaptations of this novel. Not things that were kind of sort of inspired by it, but direct adaptations where it will say, like, based on the novel by in the opening credits. Something like that. I take notes as I'm reading the book and watching the movies, then I compile the notes, I make a list, I assign a little point system, and I see which movie adaptation was most closely related to the original book. Little disclaimer I always like to make for the Adaptation Showdowns is that I am not saying which is my favorite film, and I'm not saying which is the best film, like objectively critical score-wise. I'm just saying which movie most closely follows the original story in the original published book. Once the Adaptation Showdown is over and I say which one is the winner, I will then go on to talk about what I thought about the movies, which one was my favorite, least favorite, some funny moments throughout these, so stick around till the end. The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Each version of the story, the main character has to figure out what's going on and stop the alien invasion before it's too late. And I need to finish this Adaptation Showdown before it gets too late. So, let's get started. Let's start off with some basic facts about the story. Where and when does this take place? In the original book, it takes place in the 1950s in a fictional town called Santa Mira in the state of California. In the 1990s Body Snatchers, it takes place in the 1990s in an army base in the South. No point for them. In the 2007 Body Snatchers, it takes place in current day 2007 in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. So, no point for them. First point is going to go to the 1950s Body Snatchers because it takes place in the 1950s in the fictional town of Santa Mira, California. Interesting little bit of trivia I found just reading Wikipedia about this. Another movie to take place in Santa Mira, California is my favorite movie from the Halloween series, which is Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. That's pretty cool. I am not going to give a point to the 1970s Body Snatcher for taking place in the, 70s. It's not the 50s, so that's not the same. But I am going to give it a point for taking place in California, specifically San Francisco. Like I said, Santa Mira is not a real place, apparently, but in the book, it was described as being pretty close to San Francisco. So if I were going to give any of the other movies a point besides the 50s one, it's going to be the 70s. Next point to talk about is the main character's job. In the book, he was a doctor. He was a general practitioner. He was like the main doctor in a small town that knew everyone. Everyone comes to him for their general ailments. One interesting thing throughout the book and all the movie adaptations is that the main character always seems to have some kind of science or medical related profession. The 70s one is not going to get a point because Donald Sutherland is a health inspector who goes to restaurants and tells them you got ratatouille, you got to close the place down. The 1990s Body Snatcher is not going to get a point because the main character is this girl here and she doesn't have a full-time job. She's just like a student, I guess. She's school-going age. Her dad, however, is the scientist in the story. He's checking some poisonous stuff at the base that they go to live at. The 2007 Body Snatchers is not going to get a point because the main character, Nicole Kidman here, is a psychiatrist. The only movie to get a point for this is the 1950s one because the main guy is a general practitioner. Alright, next couple of topics. We got some easy points for all these movies. So, besides the main character, there is an important role for the love interest of the main character in the story. So, the 1950s one is going to get a point. There we got Becky Driscoll. That's the same name as in the original story. 1970s one is going to get a point because Donald Sutherland and that girl, they got the hots for each other. 1990s Body Snatchers is also going to get a point because that guy is the main love interest for our character. And in the 2007 version, Daniel Craig is the love interest for Nicole Kidman. The next two most important characters in the story, besides the main character and his or her love interest, is the friend couple. In the original novel, their names were Jack and Theodora Belichick. I guess they called her Teddy as a nickname for Theodora. You don't see that name much anymore. The 1950s one is going to get a point because we got Jack and Teddy Belichick right there. 2007 one is going to get a point. They're not a young couple, but we got these as like old Eastern European couple, the Belichicks. And the 1970s one, we also get a point because the Belichicks is Jeff Goldblum and what's-her-face, the girl from Alien, and they own a mud bath. The 1990s one is not going to get a point because there is no main friend couple going on this adventure with the main people. Another important character from the main story is the psychologist character. It's a fellow doctor friend of the main character, and he helps assess what's going on, tries to calm people down, say, hey, you're just being delusional. There's no alien invasion. He was wrong, but 1950s one is going to get a point because this guy right here is the psychologist's friend. The 1970s one is also going to get a point because Spock right here is playing the psychologist character. The 2007 one I'm going to give a point to because the main character is the psychologist. It's not a friend of hers that is a psychologist. The psychological aspect does play an important role in the story, and she fulfills that role, so there's a psychologist in the story. I'm giving it to that. 1990s one does not have such a character. Last point to give out for basic facts about the story is character names. I'm not going to get real nitpicky and say you have to have the exact character names that were in the book because there's a number of characters and each movie adaptation switches their names around a bit. The name switches, first name, last name, sometimes the gender of the character switches, so the name switches with that. The 1950s one is going to get a point because not all, but a lot of the characters' names are exactly the same in the book. The 1970s one is going to get a point because, again, not all, but a lot of the character names are similar in the book. Actually, the Belichick's names are the same. The main two characters, their name changes. The 2007 one also has a number of names featured in the original book. However, the 90s one, they decided to go rogue and change all the characters' names. Miles Bennell, the main guy, or Becky Driscoll, his love interest, or Jack and Teddy Belichick, Manny Kaufman, the psychologist. None of that appears in the 90s version. Next category I want to talk about is the alien invaders, the ones who go around snatching people's bodies. You know, the body snatchers. So in the original novel, the alien life forms were these plant-like pods that would assimilate organic matter near them, make a clone of it. They didn't go into exactly how, but the original form, the original being would go away, and this replica would take its place. So there were plant-like pods that produced the seeds or material that would do the cloning. So the 1950s one is going to get a point because, look at that, we got a plant-like pod from outer space. The 1970s one is going to get a point because, whoa, what's that? That's a plant-like pod. The 1990s one is going to get a point. Hey, look at those things, plant-like pods. In the 2007 Body Snatchers, there are no plant-like pods, so no point for them. However, side note, this is the grossest way that the virus alien invasion is spread in all of these movies. This is spread by the aliens barfing on you. Look at that. That's disgusting. Next thing is an easy point for all the movies is, did these aliens come from outer space? Each adaptation is going to get a point because, yes, in the 50s, there's this big speech about how they drifted in from space.
Seeds drifting through space for years took root in a farmer's field. From the seeds came pods.
Same for the 70s.
We drift through the universe from planet to planet, pushed on by the solar winds. We adapt. We survive.
Same for the 90s.
We traveled light years throughout the universe, always surviving.
In the 2007 version, I'm also going to give them a point because there is no big villain speech where he describes how they drifted in from outer space. However, in the opening sequence of the movie, we do see this spaceship burning up the atmosphere and all those stuff flying around, implying it, came from space. Next point to give out about the aliens, and this is really important. Do they make body replicas of the humans. You know, that's kind of, do they snatch their bodies? Do they do that? The 50s one is going to get a point because, yeah, well, it's what the whole story's about. 70s one is going to get a point because, look at that, that's disgusting. The 90s one is also going to get a point because they're making those little body replicas there. Look at that thing. However, the 2007 one is not going to get a point because there's no body snatching going on. They dropped the Body Snatchers. This movie just called The Invasion. Aliens spread not through plant-like pods that create body replicas of you, which you think is like the core of the story, really. But the 2007 one, it spread much more like a virus. Like, for example, this guy right here, that's one of the Belichiks. He's getting his body snatched by the aliens, except they don't make a body replica of him. He just looks really sick. And then the sickness is like absorbed by his body, and then he is one of them. This movie kind of sucked. So they have these plant-like pods. They create a body replica of you. And that replica just sits there. It waits for you to fall asleep. And when you fall asleep, it does a copy-paste of your consciousness, your brain, and puts it in the clone's brain. Steals your mind while you sleep. The 1950s version, yes, we have that.
Suddenly, while you're asleep, they'll absorb your minds.
The 1970s version, look at that. Donald Sutherland can't stay awake, and then aliens coming to get him. 1990s version, main character there, she falls asleep, then the aliens come to take her mind. 2007, also going to get a point because staying awake is a big part of that story. Last point I want to give out regarding the aliens from the main story was that in the original book, the replica clones had no fingerprints. That was one of the first things that the main character tested. He's like, what's wrong with his body? I don't know. Let's check his fingerprints. Oh my God, it has no fingerprints. The 1950s version is going to get a point because that happens basically exactly like it did in the book. 1970s Body Snatchers is also going to get a point for that. The other two movies are not. This was nowhere to be found. Next section I want to talk about is the story beats, the plot points. What happens in the Body Snatchers story? Well, first way to start this off is that in the original book, there was a bit of a frame story. A frame story is something that before the bulk of the story happens, there's a little bit before and a little bit after that frames the main events of the story. It frames how you're seeing them. In the book, it wasn't that big of a thing, the frame story. It wasn't that important, but it's there. The main character is sort of telling you all what happened, like he survived the whole event and is retelling this story to you. It's not happening live. The only movie that's going to get a point for this is the 1950s version. This main guy bursts into this doctor's office looking like a madman, and they say, calm down, what happened?
Now you must listen to me, you must understand me.
And you tell me what happened.
For me, it started last Thursday.
The original book opens with a scene where Becky goes to Miles' doctor's office and privately tells him that someone close to her is an imposter. Something's not right about him. Each movie shows this, but in a different way and to different degrees of accuracy. So I decided to group the next handful of points together. If you're 25% accurate, you're going to get 1 point. Next level is going to be 2 points, then 3, then 4, and so on. So let's get started. For 1 point, does the movie feature a scene where someone intimates to the main character that someone close to them is an imposter? 2007 one is going to get a point because this lady here tells Nicole Kidman that her husband is an imposter. The 1990s one gets a point because, well, we actually get 2 scenes of that. This girl tells the main character and her younger brother says that the mom's an imposter. So for 2 points, is the person telling the main character's love interest? The 1970s one is going to get 2 points because that is Becky telling not Miles but Matthew Bonnell that her husband is an imposter. So for 3 points, is the love interest telling the main character that someone close to them is an imposter the opening scene of the story? The 1950s one is going to get 3 points because that is just like it happened in the original story. So after they tell the main character that someone close to them is an imposter, do we get a scene where Miles, the main character, goes to check on that person? The 1950s one is going to get a point because that happens right after that scene.
It's him. He's your Uncle Ira, all right.
He is not.
How is he different?
That's just it. There is no difference you can actually see.
After checking on whether or not that person was an imposter, the main character Miles and his love interest Becky go on a date later that evening. However, that date is interrupted by some troubling news from a friend of his. The only movie to get a point for this is the 1950s, because look, they're having a grand old time in the 50s, and then, ooh, telephone.
Oh, doctor. There's our evening.
Next point to give out is that in the original novel, the friend couple are the first people to show the main couple that there is a body replica, a clone, on their property. The 1950s one is going to get a point because, again, this is pretty much exactly like it was done in the book. The 1970s one is also going to get a point because Jeff Goldblum here has an alien clone replica in his mud bath lounge. Never thought I'd say that sentence. So in the original story, the friend couple shows the main guy the alien replica. They talk about it, they investigate it, they don't know what to do, but he says, I'm going to leave, but just watch it overnight. Let me know if anything changes. Then while watching it overnight, Mrs. Belichick sees the alien clone replica move, and she freaks out. So what movies show that? The 1950s one is going to get a point because, hey, that's just like it was in the book. 1970s one is also going to get a point because, look, clone Jeff Goldblum opens his eyes and she freaks out. After freaking out, does the friend couple go and then awaken Miles in the middle of the night? Only movie to get a point for that is the 1950s one. That's basically just like it was in the book. Then the main character says, wait, I've got to go check on Becky. I got to make sure she's okay. So he runs out. That was in the original book. What movies was it in? Well, the 1950s one, just like it was in the book. He says, oh my God, what about Becky? Gets in his car and goes there. 1970s one also gets a point because Donald Sutherland, with his sweet 70s afro there, he gets concerned for his love interest and goes to check on her. Miles runs over to Becky's house. Her front door is locked, but he really has to go see her, make sure she's okay, so he breaks into her basement. So the 1950s one is going to get a point because, hey, look, he breaks into her basement. 1970s one also going to get a point because Donald Sutherland takes that wood off the door and goes right on in. Okay, here's another little multi-point thing. This one's a little shorter, but let's have fun. So for 1 point, when he goes in Becky's house, does he find a body double of her? So 1970s gets a point because he sees the body double. Look, there she is. For 2 points, is the body double in her basement? 1950s one is going to get a point because that body double is found in the basement. 1970s one, he finds it, but it's not in the basement. Because look, he goes right up the stairs. That's not the basement. He goes to Becky's bedroom and she's sleeping. Her mind is slowly being zapped by the alien. Gets her out of there, runs back to his place where the Belichicks are also waiting. Let's go back and check on the body at your house. When they get back to his house, is that body gone? 1950s is also going to get a point because the body is no longer on the pool table.
Somebody's playing games.
1970s is also going to get a point because there's a whole bunch of scenes of them going, it was right here.
It was there, David. I swear to God it was there. Officer, there was a body in there. It was a duplicate of Elizabeth Driscoll and it's been taken away.
Next thing from the original story is that after they go and check on the bodies and the bodies are gone, they try and rationalize what's going on. They try and put some logic to this, say, hey, this isn't really an alien invasion. The bodies weren't even there. We're just going crazy. So the 50s one gets a point.
Whatever it is, it's well within the bounds of human experience, and I don't think you ought to make any more of it.
70s one gets a point because Spock is using his logic to try and rationalize everything.
It's like there's some kind of a hallucinatory flu going around.
My friend has had some difficult emotional experiences during the last couple of days.
The 90s one is going to get a point because the older sister tells her younger brother, oh, it's just nothing.
She's not Mommy, Marty.
She is your mommy.
Her father, the scientist, is also trying to rationalize this to the leaders at the base here who are concerned for their soldiers.
I don't know what you're seeing, Doc, but I can tell you it's not the PCBs. That phenomena, it's just not part of the symptomology.
2007 is also going to get a point because psychiatrist character Nicole Kidman rationalizes to her patients that, hey, this could all just be in her head.
I want to see you again as soon as possible. I'm going to change your medication.
Someone's definitely made this. We'll put it at Walmart. It is Halloween.
Next thing is that in the original book, there is a scene where after all the craziness that one night, the main character is going around town and everyone thinks the hysteria is over. All those patients that came to him saying, hey, someone I know is an imposter, they all think, I'm better now. I'm not going crazy. Everything's just fine. So the 1950s one has a couple lines like that, so they get a point.
I woke up this morning and everything was all right. You know how relieved I am.
Oh, yes, I do.
1970s one is also going to get a point because this guy here says, oh yeah, everything's fine.
Much better now.
No. I want everybody to see that I'm back to myself again.
In the original book, when they think the hysteria is over and it's quiet, but too quiet, then they find body replicas of the main characters. So what movies get a point for that? The 1950s one is going to get a point because, look at that, all four of them body replicas right there. 1970s is also going to get a point because as Donald Sutherland is sleeping, the aliens try and make a clone of him and Becky and the other people. In the original book, there's a scene where the main character, Miles, tries to call a friend of his in the government for help. The 1950s one gets a point because the main guy is trying to call for help.
Well, try again. That office is open day and night.
It's no use. All the Los Angeles circuits are dead.
1970s is also going to get a point because they have a scene that's pretty much exactly like it was in the book.
You haven't actually analyzed anything. You have no tissue samples.
Is this just a case of paranoia, Mr. Bennell?
In the original book, there was a scene where Miles is driving and then he stops. He hears something in the trunk. He gets out and finds one of the alien pods in the trunk of his car. So he takes it out on the side of the road and burns that thing. So the only movie to show that is the 50s one. They get another point. Look at them burning that right there. Burn, you bastards. In the book, there's a pretty creepy scene where Miles goes to check on Becky's cousin that he originally went to check on at the beginning of the story, and before he goes in the house, he hears a bunch of the replicas talking outside, and he hides outside the window. And he can just tell they're alien replicas from just listening outside the window, the uncanny nature of how they're speaking. So what movie shows that? The only one to get a point is the 50s one, because this is pretty much how I pictured it in my head while reading the book.
Baby asleep yet, Sally?
Not yet, but she will be soon. And there'll be no more tears.
After spying on the replicas outside that open window, the local cop in the town approaches Miles. He's a replica now. Miles knows this, so he punches out the cop and runs away. Only movie to show this is the 50s. Ready? Boom! Run away. Next group of points also come from a critical scene that was shown in the book and in each version of the movie, but in different ways. So for a point, is there a scene where the main character is being chased by a bunch of the replicas and they hide? It's not like just regular hiding. It's like a very critical hiding scene. 2007 Body Snatchers is going to get a point because look at that. Nicole Kidman and her son are hiding. For another point, are they hiding in the main character's office? 50s Body Snatchers gets a point because just like in the original book, they were hiding in his doctor's office. 70s Body Snatchers is also going to get a point because they're hiding in his office, which is also like the laboratory. While hiding in the office, Miles and Becky look out the window in the town square and a bunch of trucks come by. A bunch of big flatbed trucks that are loaded with the alien pods that are just going to make more replicas of people. And they distribute these pods, say like, who has family in Los Angeles? And some raise their hand and they give them the pods and say, go, distribute. And pretty creepy stuff. So what movies get a point for this? The 50s one does, because this is basically just like how I pictured it in my mind while reading the book. 70s Body Snatchers gets a point. 90s Body Snatchers gets a point. 2007 Body Snatchers does not get a point because, like I said, there are no pods in that story. The way the 2007 Body Snatchers shows this is just, again, disgusting. It's barfing and viruses spreading. So one of the alien replica guys is holding a conference for other science people. They are not yet replicas. However, they're going to drink the coffee in the back, and I guess all the servants in the conference place are replicas, so they just start barfing in the coffee. I mean, come on, look at that. So during this critical hiding scene, is it followed by a critical confrontation scene? Some of the main bad guy replicas, people they trusted, have now turned. They come into their hiding place and confront them. So what movies show this? The 50s gets a point. Look at that. They're being confronted. 70s gets a point. 90s Body Snatchers gets a point because Arlie Ermey comes in to scare Forrest Whitaker. And 2007 Body Snatchers gets a point because this guy comes in to scare the crap out of Nicole Kidman. While the main characters are hiding in his office and they're being confronted by people close to them that have turned into aliens, in the original book, they escape by doing some sort of sneak attack. The 50s does. It's not exactly like it was in the book. It's close enough, so they get a point. The 70s does, because they do a little, look at that, sneaky. And the 2007 Body Snatchers also gets a point. The 1990s Body Snatcher does not get a point because there's no sneak attack, and Forrest Whitaker sneak attacks himself, I guess you could say. So after they sneak attack the replicas that cornered them and they get away, is there a critical scene where the main character and a love interest try and blend into the town that is already filled with replicas? It's kind of a famous scene from the book that's in every single version of the movie. They're all going to get a point for this. Main character and love interest have to just try and look normal in this town that's filled with replicas. And they realize that they can be fooled. You just don't have to show any emotion in your eyes or anything. So just walk around like a blank face.
Keep your eyes a little wide and blank. Show no interest or excitement.
They can be fooled.
How?
Don't show any emotions. Hide your feelings.
Just don't show any emotion. They can be fooled.
You can fool them, but you gotta calm down. Don't show emotion.
That's like a big thing that made the replicas uncanny and just seem off, is that they had no emotion behind the words they were saying. After the main character and love interest are walking through the town filled with replicas trying to blend in, at some point soon after, something goes wrong, and then all the replicas find out, hey, wait a minute, they're still human, and they all go and try and attack them. There's a big scene where the main characters are running away from the swarm of replicas. What movies show that? All movies are going to get a point here, because that's another pretty big thing of the story. 50s gets a point, 90s gets a point, 2007 gets a point, and the 70s gets a point. And I say this one for last because the way that their cover is blown is the funniest to me. There's this like dog with a mask on.
Elizabeth?
And look at that thing. What the hell is that? So after running from the swarm, do the main characters then hide in the outskirts of town in the wilderness? The original book, they did. 50s gets a point because it's not like a field like described in the book, but it's the wilderness, it's a cave, whatever. 70s Body Snatchers gets a point. This is actually more closer like how it was done in the book. It's like a field, a bunch of brush they hide in. So everyone's chasing the main characters. They hide in the wilderness, and while they're hiding, the main character finds some kind of facility that is mass producing the alien pods that are then going to be distributed around the country, around the world to take over the whole planet. 50s Body Snatchers is going to get a point because of the movies that show this. This is probably closest like it's done in the book. It was described in the book as some kind of farm. 70s Body Snatchers is going to get 2 points because not only does he find a mass pod production facility, but he then destroys it. He burns it down. And that was just like it was done in the book. So the main character destroys the pod production facility, they're on the run, they fight some more replicas, they run some more, and just when they think they have no more energy, they can't go any farther, the replicas stop. They look around and all the pods, the alien pods are just drifting back into space. And then all the replicas, they have kind of a hive mind thing between them. They all just kind of give up and go home. They leave them alone. What happened was that it wasn't just the small town of Santa Mira, they realized that other small towns around the US, I guess around the world too, have fought back against the alien invaders enough. The aliens decided that Earth was not worth it because the humans were putting up just too much resistance. So they cut their losses and ran. They couldn't handle one day on Earth. Try living in New Jersey. None of the movies are going to get a point because all of the movies' endings are different than the book. None of the movies have a happy ending like it was shown in the book. I'm not going to spoil any of the movies' endings because they were all slightly different, and one in particular had a very good twist ending. Apparently this is a very famous twist ending that I did not know about, and when I saw it for the first time, I was like, oh my god, it really got me. And I don't want to spoil that if anyone wants to see it. I'm not even going to tell you which one. If you know, you know, because now I know. Last section to talk about before we conclude the Adaptation Showdown is just some little details from the original book that were featured in some of the movies. So first point for little details is going to go to the 1970s Body Snatchers because in the original book, the character Jack Belichick had a very interesting and eclectic collection of newspaper articles that he saved throughout the years. A lot of these stories are just very odd and unexplainable, like there was one about raining frogs or something. This was the scene when they were trying to rationalize everything. He goes, guys, look, crazy stuff can happen all the time. Look at all these examples I have. So an extra point that all the movies are going to get is taking stuff to stay awake. The aliens complete their cloning of you when you're sleeping. That's when they steal your mind. After the main characters realize that, there's a big attempt to not fall asleep so they don't get turned into aliens.
Now take 2 of these. I'll help you to stay awake.
Speed, it'll keep us awake.
How many are you supposed to take?
It says take 1.
Take 5.
The 2007 one I think is funny because in addition to pills, she's also chugging Mountain Dew. Wonder how much they paid to get that in there. So the last point I want to give out for little details about the story is in the original book, the main character, Miles, had these 2 human skeletons for science reasons in his doctor's office. And they just, look cool, having life-size skeletons. He had a male and a female skeleton. So the aliens wanted to turn Miles and Becky into replicas, but instead they put the skeletons down near the pods, and the pods started to clone the skeletons. So the pods assimilated not living people. They assimilated bones too. I thought that was kind of cool. So the only movie to show that is a 1970s one. We see this whimsical hobo here playing the banjo and his dog. The aliens didn't totally get their cloning right. They did like a human-dog hybrid. Looks interesting. So, in conclusion, which of these 4 movie adaptations is the most accurate to the original Body Snatchers book? I think it should be no surprise by now that the winner of the Adaptation Showdown is the 1950s, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Your
So now that the Adaptation Showdown is done, just really quick, how would I rank these 4 movies? I think my favorite was the 1970s Body Snatchers. There was just something about it. I liked how it wasn't set in a small town USA, but it was set in big town USA in San Francisco. The new setting added to the claustrophobic, chaotic nature of it. So like when the swarm is attacking you, it's not a small town. It's a whole city of replicas attacking you. And just the camera work was great in the movie. There was a lot of Dutch angles going on, a lot of creepy angles, good use of shadows. The soundtrack was awesome. It was like these really creepy, like warbling synths, like... My second favorite one was the 1950s Body Snatchers. The main guy, Kevin McCarthy's performance, no, not that Kevin McCarthy, this guy here, his performance was great, especially the ending. The end scene was just amazing. I've seen this reference in other things when he's like, "You're next, they're here, they're coming for you, they're coming for all of us." It's so cool. It's ridiculous, but he was so into it. I loved it. My third favorite one was the 90s Body Snatchers. It was okay. I wasn't that into it. It's worth a watch. If you like these stories, it's really not bad. Maybe it just wasn't for me. I know some people do like it. It got good reviews. It's got Forrest Whitaker in it. It's got R. Lee Ermey, some other good actors. The whole end scene when everything is going crazy, when the plot's really ramping up. I thought all that was really well done. So my least favorite of these was the 2007 Body Snatchers. It was not good. I feel like they missed some fundamental stuff about the story. There were no body replicas. No bodies were being snatched. It was like a virus. This isn't a virus story. It's an alien invasion, possible fear of communists in the 50s kind of story. You know, it's an allegory. It's a metaphor. It should be a metaphor for the fears of the time the story was written in. What was this even a metaphor, an allegory for? Viruses spreading? We've seen that before. 70% of this movie is just Nicole Kidman running around looking concerned. I couldn't follow the plot at all, and the ending just like fizzled. Nothing happened. Okay, my last little section before we end, I wanted to share some of my random fun thoughts I had while watching these movies. So to start off, I like this line from the 50s one.
Somebody's playing games.
I like this because from every 50s and 60s sci-fi horror movie and a whole bunch of Twilight Zone episodes, there's always a scene where the main character goes, "Whoa, I was just here a minute ago. Oh, you gotta believe me. I saw it with my own 2 eyes." These aren't that important, but in the 50s one, I like the names of these 2 businesses in the background. So I like this gas station's name is just Lubrication. I mean, that's funny. And this hot dog stand, look at this. It's called the Hot Dog Show. And they got a neon dachshund in a hot dog bun. And over there, they got a neon dachshund hot dog with angel wings. So another thing I like about the 50s Body Snatchers is that the cinematography and the lighting had this real film noir aspect to it. And the angles and characters just running and the way they set up all the shots, it was really cool. I mean, look at that. Like, if you want to tell someone what film noir is, like, look at that. Look at those shadows, man. I like the shot of them hiding down there and the light turns on. And I feel like the 70s one tried to pay homage to it, I guess you could say, because the running away scenes, they felt similar to me. Not exactly the same, but like you got the scene where they're hiding and the light shine on them. Okay, so in the 70s Body Snatchers, I mentioned the Belichick characters, they own a mud bath spa, and this is the dirtiest looking place. Look at this. Would you want to go here? A bunch of fat guys in tubs of mud. Imagine the smell. Then you get this happy individual reading this book here. Well, yeah, it's not a place I would hang out. Just once more. Look at that. What is that? So in the 70s Body Snatcher, the main couple is driving down the street talking about what's going on, and they get stopped in traffic by this crazy guy.
You're next, please! Please! You're next! We're in danger! Please, listen to me! Something terrible! Please! You're next!
And that is the same guy from the 50s Body Snatcher, the same actor, Kevin McCarthy, doing his same iconic ending. I love to see that again. That's so cool.
You fools! You're in danger! Can't you see? They're after you! They're here already! You're next!
Because if you think about it, it's implying that for 20 years, he's just been running around like a crazy person, shouting, "They're coming! They're coming!" That's hilarious. So in the 90s Body Snatcher, this one guy is trying to attack the main characters, and they shoot him. And just the way he falls to his death is so dramatic and over the top. He looks like one of those things from a used car lot. Okay, also from the 90s Body Snatcher, look at this fabulous shot of the kid falling from the helicopter. Oh my god. It looks like those crocodiles from Temple of Doom or something. Okay, also from the end of the 90s Body Snatchers, what is this voiceover that the movie ends with?
Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna run? Where are you gonna hide?
Where are you gonna hide? A thing about the 2007 Body Snatchers that I really did not like was the acting, especially from Nicole Kidman. Like, 90% of the movie was her just running around concerned, and the rest of it was her looking stoic. Like the scene in her psychiatrist's office with that person telling her where my husband is an imposter. Just look at all the expressions she makes, like very serious and cold. Another interesting thing about the 2007 Body Snatchers is that apparently the production was a little troubled, and to help with the troubles and to help get the movie written better, they brought in the Wachowskis to rewrite some scenes and tweak some of the details. I'm a big fan of the Wachowskis. I love the Matrix trilogy, and like a lot of their other movies, I think I know their style pretty well. And I don't know what scenes they rewrote or what lines they rewrote, but I'm gonna make some guesses. I'm going to make some guesses here as to which ones I think they rewrote and contributed to. Let me know if you agree.
Civilization is an illusion, a game of pretend.
Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without.
What is real is the fact that we are still animals, driven by primal instincts. We are all capable of the most terrible crimes. Imagine a world where this was not so, where every newspaper is not full of war and violence. This is to imagine a world where human beings cease to be human.
The first Matrix I designed was quite naturally perfect. It was a work of art, a triumph equaled only by its monumental failure. The inevitability of its doom is apparent to me now as a consequence of the imperfection inherent in every human being. Thus I redesigned it, to more accurately reflect the varying grotesqueries of your nature.
So what do you think? Can you help me? Can you give me a pill?
That is about all I've got for today. If you've watched to this point, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always, and I hope you enjoyed this Adaptation Showdown of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Thank you, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.